So our guest today, we've got Mokete with us and we've got Professor Berry with us. I'm going to hand over to you, gentlemen, to greet the world. Now it's no longer just on radio where we just greet our viewers on radio, but now we are greeting the whole world because this video is going to go all over the world. So let's just greet them. Over to you, gents.
Yeah, I think because I'm the youngest, I'll allow the elder to start.
Okay.
I don't know who the elder is, but yeah, let me introduce myself quickly. My name is Berry Rulani Hanyane. I'm attached to the Northwest University, and that is the Port campus. My department or so-called subject group, as we use the plan here, is public management and governance, and I've been here for about 6 years now, having spent considerable amount of time at UNISA, and I suspect that's the reason why partially Radebe wanted me to come here and share that online experience from there to now, and of course with the new challenges and prospects at hand, reflect on that as well. So I'm not here claiming to be an educational fundi, but I'm here to share whatever experience is there.
Oh, that's great, Professor. When you mention UNISA, I get ticked because I got my qualification through UNISA, and I think that was in 2016 when I was writing my final module for investment. We had to do it as an online exam. So I think for people that have been studying with UNISA, this time is not really a strange time for them. It's not really a strange time for them. It's something that they've been familiarized with. So I think that expertise from the UNISA side that you have, it's going to help us also this afternoon. And Radebe.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mokete Radebe, one of the youngest on this panel tonight, rather this afternoon. What I do is I'm a broadcaster. I do a talk show on 20 FM, 93.6. One of the most thriving radio stations in the country at the moment. And I also work as a communication specialist dealing with digital communication from the Tshwane University of Technology. I'm currently pursuing a master's in marketing, and I've got a number of qualifications from that university as well. And I've got a qualification from UCT in social media marketing, and I think that's the direction I'm heading in terms of the work that I do now. And yeah, I think Oscar and I share the passion of community building, and maybe it's because of the humble beginnings that we've started from. Our journeys from time to time remind us that whatever we are, whatever we have, we owe it to society, because we didn't make ourselves. It is them that made us.
Awesome. No, thank you so much, gents, for your time. We've got people that are with us from Botswana. I see on Facebook there, and some people from different countries actually that are viewing and having a chat with us. So later on, we are to take questions. So for those that are having questions, just put them on the comment box, and then we'll be able to attend to them. But as we get to it, let's get to it, guys. This is Tips Talk, and it's something that has been in my heart, and we have started it. Let's share information. That's the whole idea about this thing, is to share information. Let information be available for everybody who is. I think, just as a start, gentlemen, what's your take on the issue of schools reopening with the current COVID going on? What's your take on that?
All right, let me start on this one. The reopening process of not just education, but many facets of the economy, or rather many sectors of the economy. It's as empirical as the lockdown, right? And this is in comprehension of how governments need to manage the livelihood of people. I like the approach of opening schools in a way, in a manner in which it is being faced, that not everyone needs to come in, but some people need to come in. Because I think the one challenge that government was trying to be mindful of, from my view, is to close the economy for the whole year and wake up to no economy, and now be faced with a different form of weapon, that is poverty, frustrations. I could imagine if young minds are being left to idle for a long time, what could happen there? As risky as it is, I feel it's a bold step, so to say.
Yeah. Prof, what's your take?
Yeah, look, I think from my side, it's somewhat of a tricky situation. This administration is faced with a difficult task of trying to manage what science would put on the table versus realities, and realities that come from a particular background and a particular setting. Not so long ago, we experienced fatalities, we experienced unsavory incidences in our schools involving our learners, all because of poor sanitation. In some instances, one can make reference to the KZN province, the difficulty of accessing these facilities, learners having to cross crocodile-infested rivers, having to walk a long distance, my own province, the Northwest, and all other related challenges elsewhere in the country. And what COVID-19 has already exposed, and I'm careful with the usage of words, particularly given the fact that we have an international audience today,
yes,
is the fact that we rightly have been exposed of our deficiencies in our administration. We're a developing nation, therefore, by default, it simply means certain services, the infrastructure included, it's not up to standard. There is still a limited amount of cases where there's violation of human rights, for instance. And we've seen this even in urban areas, in the case of the high school in Pretoria, where girls were asked to present themselves in a particular way, questioning the natural presentation of their being. So all these challenges, and others, of course, are highlighted in the way government responds to COVID-19. What saddens me the most is that we have invested a little in terms of physical infrastructure to provide safety, to provide access, I've mentioned that earlier on, but most importantly, to provide a physical space for proper learning. Even if there are strides, and one can make reference here to Gauteng province, crime becomes the order of the day. We are told that there has been a break-in and laptops and other important resources that are used in those schools have been stolen. So it speaks in totality to the fragmentation of society and the degree of difficulty that our society is going through. And the opening of schools should, in a way, be superseded, in my view, by an attempt by this administration to address some of the challenges. One would argue strongly that the lockdown was deliberately instituted in giving space for this administration to curb, so-called flatten the curve, but equally to put in place a concerted government response to the amount of challenges that we have. So it remains to be seen. Are we providing a safe and a healthy, and I mean healthy, given the fact that we give food to poor students and learners in some of these institutions? Are we responding to that checklist fully so that we can ensure that learning during this difficult time, it's not subjecting our learners to some chamber of death or something of that nature?
I think in that same note, we'll just continue from it. And I think you're raising a very, pertinent, point, Professor, in terms of, how it has from time to time, created a catch-22 type of situation where we are aware of the inequalities that our society and our continent, I think, so to say, has been presented with, especially with regards to schools that are in the rural areas. And I think what has been a challenge for me has always been, how do we make sure that as we try to bring about, a safer or conducive, environment for teaching and learning for those that are less privileged, we are at the same time making sure that they don't get to suffer them. Because if we can look at now, the schools that are, largely affected by, academic challenges now are schools in the rural areas. Quite frankly, the schools that are, that are in the well-care are being, have been continuing with teaching and learning, so to say. So it's a very, very difficult, situation, so to say, and it requires, sober-minded decision making, but also it requires, a government that has, its people, at heart when it takes decisions. And I think it's something that is quite difficult, primarily because of what I've realized, that in some instances our government has been, bowing down to pressure from, the global interests, from investors. I'm not in that seat, so sometimes it's difficult to speak on government behalf. But I really agree with you. It's a very quickie situation. It's a quagmire, so to say. I see Oscar is back in the driving seat. Yes, Oscar.
Technology, network just happened here, and it's one of the things that we're going to talk about, because I remember one of my friends, he was writing an online exam, and the PC just went off. So this is one of the things that can happen with this technology. So Prof, I'm gonna come straight to you. When it comes to, let me just talk about your institute just a little bit. I don't want to go much into detail. What is it that you're putting in place so far? With the way forward that has been declared with the Minister of Higher Education.
Yeah.
What is it as your institute, basically, before we touch generally on all other institutes? You guys, what are you doing currently?
Yeah. Well, we trying to comply with your general standard response, firstly, through putting in place structures that should deliberately and purposefully, of course, respond to these challenges. At national level, we have your so-called COVID-19 Command Council team. One can replicate that approach at the university and establish a command war room. We have the war room, which then deals specifically with input coming from students, input coming from staff, which then informs a way forward, obviously with the dictate of government regulations. So that's important. So this is what we have done. So at the center of this is your middle management, is your dean, is the directors of various schools that must ensure that there is communication. But let's be frank to one another. And I want to be open at all times when we deal with critical national issues and issues of national interest in turn, is that none of us was ready for this experience. I, for one, had a busy week during the lockdown period. I hardly managed to scramble books that I need to read right now. So what does this mean? It simply means we have entered into this unknown territory, and yet there must be a deliberate effort to try to normalize, which becomes difficult. And for most of us, the minute you get home, depending on your social status, whether you're single or married, whether you've got kids or you're co-parenting, all those roles come direct into conflict with your newfound space And that makes life difficult.
Yeah.
And one would then acknowledge the amount of difficulties that our students have in turn. No laptops, no data. Some come from poor backgrounds where they are sharing one shack as 9 members, arguably. And issues of movement, issues of transportation, issues of access to resources that they need to have at all times. And let me emphasize on the last part. We've given out what we call continuous online assessments. And we've done away with the old, I'm saying old, 2020, early 2020 assessment schedule. We had to reintroduce new assessments. Now, these assessments are designed in a way that we don't put too much pressure on students' cognitive ability to give feedback, but most importantly, acknowledging the fact that no library will service them. And that's a fact, it's the truth.
That's true.
As Dr. Radebe said earlier, the unfortunate reality is that your socio-economic disparities among students themselves come to bear. And here, my own experience right here in Potchefstroom, where you have white and black students, where you have white students en masse driving cars. Some own, I didn't say rent, some own places of residences. Some come from privileged background where the father can simply connect with whoever elsewhere to get resources and so forth. So those disparities come to the fore in a very harsh way, where at the end of the day, as a lecturer, you end up going an extra mile, engaging students through additional social platforms like your WhatsApp, your Twitter, and so forth. Having repository of resources, you begin to open up that space and share with those students as well. So you've become this difficult person by default. And I'm using the word difficult given the burden that comes with the new role that I have to play. One moment I'm a counselor, one moment I'm a librarian, one moment I'm an academic, a lecturer in charge of a particular course or module. The next moment I'm an assessor. The next moment I'm a counselor, because rightly so, there are social issues that have emerged that were never imagined before. And we need to deal with those so that we make teaching and learning a much more accessible, conducive space for everybody.
No, that's brilliant. You know, and when you talk about social issues, I'm thinking, I was just wondering earlier on, and it's one of my questions I'm going to ask you later on. And I'm wondering, what if this guy or a lady, they are coming from a home where they all live in a one room and they need to study and they need to write an exam online? How do we help such a person, you know, but just put it behind. There's this statement I'm going to read, and I want to hear, and I'll start with you, Mokete, just to tell me, what's your view on this statement? I see it was released by SAFT some few days ago. It says, online education is integral to the future of higher education. Embrace it or become irrelevant. What's your take and your comment on that?
I think to jump into that statement, I want to also borrow the words of Arthur Troffel, and he said, the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who won't be able to read or write, but it will be those who won't be willing and are mindful of won't be willing to learn, relearn, and unlearn. And I think in marketing, where we were taught that change has got stages, and the first stage is denial, all the way to the other, stages, and there was that, that contradiction where we found ourselves saying, "Nah, man, it can't be. We won't be going online. We'll go back to normality." And now that we are realizing we're in that, predicament where the question would be in organizations: do we replace Perry and bring in a young person or someone else that comprehends how to provide teaching and learning in this new norm, right? But do we say that now Berry must be buried and he's the end? So those are some of the things, right? Now, to go back to your question, I think there's no there's no there's no contradiction there. We are all agreeing that even before COVID-19, we've already seen the advent of technology and the fourth industrial revolution. I think it was a popular topic. Although in South Africa we had not even mastered the previous technologies that were already being mastered by other countries or states, so to say. So yes. In any country, in any government, in any society, change, in as much as it's uncomfortable, is something that we are all willing it's something that we are supposed to be thriving for, right? But bringing it back home and like trying to also not appear as if I'm speaking from a point of privilege in this regard, I want to say yes, the statement is right. We need to adapt, or we are going to be left behind. But in the same manner, we must not forget that in the adaptation, there's those that are not given a choice to adapt or not to adapt. So there's no way that they will adapt, and this is because of the material conditions of where they find themselves. I normally, make this example when I speak to my guest, your prof, on the show, that as we speak to the listener who's at Atteridgeville, who's at Mamelodi, who's at Hammanskraal, where their first need is water and sanitation, where in Atteridgeville their first need is shelter, the roof is leaking, where if you go to Mamelodi, there's a family, there's a young girl who, when their peers in Sentinel are choosing between getting a laptop, iPhone, or Samsung, or whatever these service providers are, now she's forced to choose between buying bread and buying sanitary towels. So in as much as we must, I think that should be the position, that we must look to moving into change, but we cannot move forward without repairing the current challenges that are faced by the vast majority, because that will be an insult to them, because then we'll be disregarding their existence in this world. And I think the sense of Ubuntu, as outlined by the government of today, is that I am because you are. So I wouldn't say I am because Berry is, when I don't care whether he ate last night or not. And I think this gospel was preached as well in churches. If you go to the book of James, where it speaks about faith and works, to say, when a brother comes to you and says, I'm hungry, you cannot tell them that we must pray when you've got 50 rand that you were going to use for petrol. So it's issue of prioritization there, that this person needs food, I need petrol, so that I can be able to go and see Berry, and chat about the game weekend when Kaiser Chiefs win. So it's all those things to say the sense of willingness must be there, but we cannot ignore the material conditions of where we find ourselves. And I think that will be a greater challenge. And from time to time, this is what I think I've advocated for, to say, in as much as we come from humble beginnings, where we can, let's help others to not go through what we've went through, and make life easier for them, in the same sense of bringing about the new change that is being presented before us.
Well, that's great. When you talk of learn, relearn, and unlearn, it just got stuck, in my head, in line with this statement that we are commenting now. Prof, over to you.
Yeah, it is reversing that time, isn't it? Where we need to embrace. I'm taken aback by developments at the University of Johannesburg under the leadership of Professor Mawara, who has somewhat put us as academics in a spot to say the world of the future requires us to shift. And we don't have an option, because this is the way the trajectory of human development across the globe is fashioned. You walk into a convenience shop in London, my immediate experience in 2012 when I was there, was you pick up whatever you want to purchase and you go to a machine and you scan all your products, you pay and you walk away. Wow. So there is less human interaction in that instance. Now, bring it closer home. So sometimes at the beginning of this year, Pick n Pay wanted to introduce this system in all its outlets. Mm-hmm. And there was an uproar from the labor force to say, this cannot happen under their watch because of the possible ramifications around retrenchments and so forth. But again, we're embracing technology. UJ Library, if you're looking for books today, you're likely to talk to a robot. Is it UJ or UP? UP. You're likely to talk to, it's UP. You're likely to talk to a library, to a robot to check whether a particular source book article is there or not, and you get a service out of that. You look at other areas where government is giving out services, use of technology becomes important. The banking sector, very much in the thick of things as well. So we cannot avoid online as a teaching mode. That's the way to go. But sadly, the expectations that this system brings may be hampered by reality on the ground. And I think that Radebe spoke to some of those issues. The socioeconomic disparities between students, the need to change the university management model, right? Let's not throw away the baby with the tap water here. We come fresh from the hashtag Fees Must Fall movement, where now universities must invest in students than ever before. The question is then asked, and I think a person like Professor Habib Edwards asked this question fundamentally. Should we take money that was meant to create research capacity and give to students? And social justice dictates that we do that, unfortunately. So we need to constantly go to the private sector and to government and to beg for more. But at the same time, management would put pressure on academics to do research, to publish, so that more money comes in. So somewhere in the system, you find academics being the unfortunate slaughter sheep expectations. New performance targets are being drafted. As I said earlier on, high demand for research outputs, since these research outputs bring more money into institutions. How then do we balance these interests? And for this generation, the first going forward, we don't know what's going to happen 50 years from now. It's a touch and go situation. It's the learning and the unlearning part, and somewhere in between, committing unfortunate mistakes. And these mistakes could either be costly or could in themselves become a hub for lessons to be learned. So it's tricky. It's really, really tricky. And let's not forget human beings at the center of all these challenges.
No, that's very true. That's very true, Professor. And you know, it puts me into remembrance of something when you I remember I would go to the library at UNISA, and when I walk into the library, they don't assist you to tell you where do you get the book. You go to the other room where the computers are, type the details of the book that you want. They tell you, it tells you the shelf number and everything. You walk in, you take. The only thing that you're going to do where a human being was going to assist me was when they were just signing me off. And that is if I take a certain number of books. When I return the books, I don't need to talk to anyone. There was sort of like a bin where I scan the book, I throw it into that bin, the book is returned.
And it's gone.
Somehow,
But just to come in there, Oscar.
Yeah.
Just to come in there quickly, the question should be asked, are a majority of our students equipped to search for their own books? You know, just during this online period, I had concerns from students. Where do we get sources? Then you want to bang your head on the wall with frustration. To say, but for starters, you went your way out during some lecture sessions to say, guys, before we start anything else, I want us to have all the necessary tools in front of us. One, do you guys know of your academic associations? That's the first starting point. I'm bringing this part because it is through associations that we're able to have access to journals, which is the second point. And it is in those journals that accredited articles are found and they can be used as credible sources. But our students don't know that, or at least some, not all. But those who do not know are in the majority, unfortunately, especially in my discipline of public governance and management. Then you ask, what about friendship that is supposed to be there between you and the subject librarian? A lot of our students don't know that. They don't enjoy that. It might be born out of lack of self-initiative or some other problems that we haven't discovered as yet. Then you ask, do you independently subscribe and gain access to your popular databases like your Google Scholar, your Sabinet, your EBSCO, your iNetBridge, Francis and Taylor, and others. And as you gain access, in all your areas of interest, do you draw these sources, not because you have an assignment, but because you have an embedded appetite to read and create your own repository in the process. So passion must drive, but do we have skills, basic skills for our students prior to imposing online demands on them?
Yeah, you know, and
Can I just jump in there, Oscar?
Jump in.
It's so funny because I think after your statement, I wanted to actually jump into what Prof. Berry came through with in terms of, the dynamic capabilities of our students and whether, are they prepared to be able to do this. But I'm taken aback by a book that was written by Professor Jansen, former Vice Chancellor of the Free State. And there's one chapter where he was saying, are universities expected to make up for 12 years of bad schooling? And it also exposed the lack of synchronicity between basic education and higher education and training. And you'd remember, Prof, when we were speaking about the conversation around decoloniality, one of your colleagues, Professor Sabela Kacheni from UNISA, would often remind us of the epistemological access to higher education. The epistemology part really of creating access to higher education, and it terms this and says we've managed to fill up universities and created even black semi-black universities in former technicons, just to accommodate the abundance of black learners that now that are actually passing matric. And I think in that sense, we're trying to make sure that the streets, learners that have matriculated, yet they've got nowhere to go, right? So all we were interested in was the quantity of black, particularly learners, going into that space without a proper plan in terms of how much have we created a format that is going to enable them to succeed in this space. I tell you now that my understanding in this epistemology, it was not just about the pedagogy of teaching and learning in these spaces, but it was also about the creation of what should be higher education and learning. we've succeeded largely in a lot of institutions, especially the black ones, in terms of educating our students about the importance of comprehending social behavior. We tell them about HIV and AIDS. We tell them, if you go to extracurricular developments, we're doing well. I mean, TUT that we are in is one of the universities that are doing very well when it comes to sport and recreation. But let's go to the core business, and I'm saying core in the sense that teaching and learning, it's really what universities are all about. How many young and I'm going to be biased and say black because of the vast majority of our young people in the country, and especially those that are from humble beginnings that are going through difficulties, are black. So how many black young people have had an opportunity to be introduced to the importance of education? Because for me to drive a passion into education, there must be something that is going to trigger that passion. You go to a matriculant now, or a person in grade 10 in a high school, or a secondary, we call them secondary school in the townships. You ask them, what do you want to study? They don't tell you what they want to study. They tell you, my teacher said I'm good with either accounting or either with maths or either with... So the question of passion becomes a secondary matter. What we look at is, what are your strengths? And we don't even know on whether your strengths are based on the fact that there's a social challenge that has affected you. But generally, when you're a person that can actually get so much marks in this area because of that's where your passion lies. And if you can look at it properly, Prof, this is the exact reason why we've got a lot of exclusions. That's why we've got a lot of dropouts. I mean, I remember in a few years, our dropout rate on first year was around 40%. And then you'd have another problem. Those who have managed to cram and pass to forget, we find that they've graduated, but they're unemployed. And we don't question, are they employable? We don't question what is the role of education, because I think that's the other thing that we've never discussed, to say what should be the presentation around education, and not try to solve social inequality issues by throwing the spanner to academics and say, education will keep them busy, and then when they come back, then we'll create to say, okay, no, those who've got proximity, because we need to also be honest to the material scenarios that we're seeing in society, that it is not because of Berry has passed 90% or can do better in an interview. It's an issue of, does Berry know Oscar? And Oscar has prepared Berry, and Oscar has centered around a position in his organization on a person near Berry. And also maybe it's because of Oscar will help Berry because of Berry's father has a business that Oscar will get to. So it's all those things to say, now the rich will always make sure that their children are sorted in one of those connections. And this is why when you go to townships, when you go to Khayelitsha, when you go to Pretoria and Marabastad, you'll always find black young people educated, yet they are into drugs, and you are unable to drive your car opening your window because they're going to steal. And then what we do then, we say black people are lazy, and we go back to households. You find that their fathers have underwent a similar challenge, and they are not there. And then we start saying, no, in fact, these black men are the reason why these black boys or these black girls are going through this thing. And it's an array of issues, and we keep on trying, to solve it, but we're making a mistake because of we're trying to bring a spice in a cup that needs sugar. And then we expect that, the tea will be okay because it has taste. Yes, it has taste, but it's not the right taste. And that is where the challenge is.
Jens, I should admit you're raising very fundamental mental matters here, but because of our time and with everything that we are highlighting, from system issues, to our leadership issues, what can you advise a student who's listening to us, a student who's going to get in touch with you, in two areas? Number one, time management. How can one manage their time, regardless at what class are they coming, what social class are they coming from? How can one manage their time and prepare for the online exams? Prof, you've got a bit of experience in terms of social matters. How can you advise people to handle, family matters, and all the dynamics that come? We just want them to make it through, because whether we like it or not, exams are going to be online. Most of the exams are going to accept physics stuff where they need to go to the lab and all that. Give somebody an address.
Yeah. You know, Oscar, let's now stop with the philosophical and idealistic, right? So debate that we've had since this morning and talk to the practical world. And I'm glad you raised this issue. One of the biggest challenges today is this thing.
Yeah.
If our generation can find a mechanism and a strategy, if you want to call it that way, to manage this, that will be nice. Starting point. My immediate experience from first year level, I don't have huge experience when it comes to that, for whatever reason. It's third year honors, master's, PhD, and of course, huge amount of time in my career spent at TSA, a former TSA, Technical Southern Africa, and then later becoming UNISA. But prior to that, Vista University for about 5 years. And we're at a height of generational revolution that today's students believe that they are married to social platforms. They can't do without Twitter. They can't do without Facebook. They can't do without all these social platforms you can think about. Failure to manage this becomes a problem. Even during lecture sessions, you find students not concentrating on the issues under discussion, but busy sending each other messages. In a given Harvard study done that this generation has a problem with concentration, I don't know. I'm not an expert in that field. But to all our students, find a way to deal with this first. Secondly, the social space. What generation are we talking about in terms of age limit? Somewhere between 18 and 24 safely, right? Undergrad. From there, postgrad, obviously 25, 26 above. If you're fortunate enough, you get your PhD around 30. I'm not worried about the big boys and the big girls. I'm worried about undergrads who, for the first time, are beginning to enjoy the freedom of university. I was there in 1990. I can testify to that. Fresh from high school, you are told, here's your timetable. And in your timetable, there's about a day or two where you do nothing, right? Radebe spoke about dropouts. I can add to that bowl of disappointments. Students who came back before even finishing their degree as parents. A disruptive phase. But here we are under lockdown suddenly. We're online. What does this mean? It begins to test your behavior since last year, if you're a second year student. It unfortunately tests your mettle if you're a first year student in 2020. If you're a third year student, you can't send me a message and say, Prof, I can't find a source. Something is wrong. So depending on the levels, learners must be ready to take the bull by its horns. And Mokete spoke about passion. Passion must translate into actions where sometimes self-isolation, the beauty about vocabulary. We can borrow this from COVID-19. Studying is a solitary experience. You've got to bite the bullet. It's a solitary experience. And in our case, when I decided to leave Vista first year, and I hated, and I'll be very frank with you, I hated classes with all my passion. To this day, it's difficult for me to listen to you lecturing me about something. Give me books, because I'm this independent somebody. So what does this tell us? It tells us, know yourself. Okay? Are you that kind of person who is able to find a corner, read, progress, and do well in your exams? Or are you that kind of a person who, from time to time, requires counseling, advice, and support? You've got to know yourself. And this is what I tell students as well. A day has 24 hours. In those 24 hours, are you active in the morning? Are you active during the day? Are you active during the night? Shouldn't you then exploit the phase where you are active and use that profitably for your studies? So the self-management part is extremely important. Lastly, don't betray your dreams. And look at it holistically. You know, I like it when students look at that red gown, you know, the doctoral regalia, and say, I want to wear that one day. But please don't tell us if you're not behaving in a manner that's commensurate with the challenge and the achievement. So a big sense of motivation must carry our students. Whether we're going online or not, let it be that the relationship between yourself, reality, and books is a value chain that's tightly knit, and it's a space conducive for productivity.
Wow. No, that's a mouthful, Professor. And you know, when you mentioned that, I'm going to throw a question, another one, before I go to Radebe to give us his input. You know, when you mention about the issue of knowing yourself and managing your time, these are very key elements that me personally, I always talk about when I do talks. But many people, they fail to translate passion into action. I think that's where many people are failing. I've seen, you know, here at my house, we live with one of my nephews, and he's studying with UP. He's a night person. You know, he can sit with us from around 6 in the evening, but after 9, you won't find him. Wake up at 3 a.m., he will be alive. When morning comes, he is gone, he's asleep. At 1 o'clock, I went to his room, he was asleep, because he's creating and managing his space and knowing his strength.
Exactly.
But somebody sitting there, they've never taken time to know themselves. They've never taken any time to go an extra mile to manage themselves and say, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and how do I maneuver through all that? Now, from all this that I'm saying, what I wanted to throw back to you, Professor, is, can we say it's lack of passion when somebody doesn't know their strengths and weaknesses? Can it be related? Can it be related to their social environment? What can be the source of one not knowing themselves?
There are so many factors, right? The upbringing comes to mind very closely, right? And let me share this anecdotal account from my very own personal experience. I was born and raised in Soweto, a township called Shawela. It's not by accident or fluke that your president come from there as well. So let me put that flag up front. It's not a disclaimer, it's a flag. Now, growing up, I was less than a kilometer away from the primary school. Okay. Coming back from school every day, my mother used to lock the gate. Lock the gate. My father persuaded her to leave her job as a nurse, you know? So she would be at home. On arrival, there's the typical 80s experience. There's your tea, there's bread, take off your clothes, put on your casual clothes, have tea, bread. She would knit just to pass time. So she would encourage me to sit next to her. She had subscribed to Reader's Digest. I don't know how many students today know Reader's Digest. And I would be persuaded to read the stories in front of her. And then you had a father who was a counselor, a legal clerk, who would pretty much cherish the notion of public speaking. Right. And would immediately come in to coach you how to speak. So it's that immediate family support that one was blessed with. A lot of reading, and even in my room, I had a huge bookshelf, and surprisingly enough, it was a problem with the girlfriends, because they would walk in. Here you are, you want to share quality time, and she looks at all those big books. Sure. And I'm one person who was not only studying public administration and politics, but since high school, each time we were sent to the library, the first book I wanted to touch was on aviation. Wow. From time to time, you would have those South African Airways drills, flyby fighter aircrafts, and I would begin to identify each as it flew past. Wow. This is a French Mirage, South African-made Cheetah, equipped with the Kurki missile. I would read extensively. Right? This is my passion. Out of reading, I find solace. I'm able to amass knowledge that one day I hope to pass on. But most importantly, this is what triggers my interest in understanding the world around me. Wow. So, do we inculcate this in our students? This is the biggest challenge for some of us. When I joined this university in 2015, in 2016, at first year level, I identified about 15 or 16 girls, black, deliberate. These were young girls who had potential, but they never displayed confidence. Then I asked the former EFF treasurer, Magdalene Monsami, to say, Magdalene, you are a recognized woman who has achieved a lot, a public figure. Can you please come over and have workshops with this group of girls? Wow. And we did that. And I'm happy today that they have completed their honors degrees. They now understand what it takes to be out there in a hostile labor world. A labor world that already demands that, one, you're passionate about work, you understand productivity, and you have a personal dream that must be fulfilled one day. This is what it means to be a student today. You've got to be able to rise up to the occasion and say, it comes from within. I did not enroll to go to university because my parents had the money to do so, or because my parents insisted I go, or else I get married and move out of their house. And as a result, they disown me. It must be because our students, as they enter the university at first year level, they already see themselves making a difference to society, occupying positions in society, and above all, satisfying their own personal dreams to become recognized persons in society.
Prof, you remind me of a Cremora advert many years ago. I think I was in primary school.
It's always on the top. It is always on the top.
It's on top. And one day I was preaching, and I then I gave an analogy to the church, and I said, but no, we are redoing that advert. Now we talk of it's inside. It's not on top. So I thought it was in Christian context, but now as you speak, I feel it applies.
It's everywhere. A universal. It's a universal principle.
Just to study
ask sportsmen who know that they have less than 15 years average to be at their highest peak. What does this mean? What does this mean? It means you must perform to your highest level. Allow that energy from within to drive your passion, to be successful and enjoy in the process. A lot of our learners, they will tell you, it's difficult to read books. Then we have a problem. Then we have a problem. And that's an individual drive, right? How is it difficult to read books, yet easy to tweet?
It's easy.
So I normally walk into a lecture theater and tease them and ask them, who in 2019 got twins? It's a general question, right? But I will find an immediate response that says it's Beyonce or somebody. I think it's Beyonce, yeah? Who got twins? I said, oh, okay. So that you know. But you can't tell me which legislation was used to pass a budget.
Sure.
Why?
Yeah, no. I'm with you, Professor. I'm with you fully.
Education is no longer fashionable. Yeah. What is fashionable is to know which song tops the charts, right? Ndate Radebe will know that. That's his job. Leave it to him. Your job as a student is to say, do I understand the epistemological questions as well as the ontological questions of my discipline? Can I sit here and listen to ministers as they address us on a daily basis around developments in the fight against COVID-19? And from a government perspective, understand the peculiar language and where needs be. You know, our ministers have made blunders in this process and we laughed about it. And I was wondering, what is the response of our students? Because not only do we teach them content, but language as well. Yeah. What is the difference between efficiency and effectiveness? It can't be used interchangeably or in a very blunt sense.
That's very true.
So they have a lot to do. Instead, what do you get usually? Hanyane's Huasaha is complex. It comes from the books.
Yeah, Professor, don't go there, don't go there. And because of time, just jump in, man, for a minute, just your comment on this matter, because I've got one key question that I want us to address as we do our closing remarks. Let's just add 5 more minutes to our time.
Yeah, I think the appreciation of having, the senior citizen is that they speak from both a professional point of view and from a fatherly point of view, and we get to learn in the process as well. And I think that's the most important thing. However, I want to jump in and say I agree fully with Prof that I think maybe also the greater challenge is the comprehension of who we are in identities, and I want to face it in these ways. So my observation was that the bigger challenge about apartheid was not only the fact that the previous generation was oppressed. How it affected the current generation is that it has given us a sense of entitlement to say, because those before us fought, that we are deserving of everything. One of the most difficult things that I was ever told when I started going for auditions, I was told that just because of you deserve it, it doesn't mean that you're going to get it or get it easily. You need to put out the work. The unfortunate thing about the current generation is that we because we know that we're entitled, we don't put in the effort. We waste time on things that we know deliberately that they will never have an impact in the kind of life that we want to. And we need to start asking ourselves honest questions. Sometimes we compare ourselves to our parents, but we become selective. So for instance, if I'm going to say, no, Luana Perry as my father, you'll never tell me that I must not drink. Luana used to drink or used to have girlfriends. Perry never asked for money from his parents. Perry built his house, Perry worked hard. Can we do the same thing as well in our space to say, just like Perry, I'm not going to ask anything from my parents. I'm going to work hard, build a house, and then kebele tahwa, right? And I think that's where the challenge is, to say our problems are not so much on some of the material conditions that we're facing, but sometimes our problems have been that we want to live a life of sympathy and total entitlement. And I think we touched on this in one webinar where I was saying there's young children or young people that remember that they've got associations when it's time for them to go and watch football go next door, or when it's time for them to find ways out, tech study, boyfriend and all that. So they find a way, they find resources. But when it's time for finding, when it's time for, to get a book to read or to get a laptop to type an assignment, you can't go next door, but how you share TV until midnight? That, it doesn't come in. In actual fact, as young people, we put our parents under pressure to be in debt for the expensive clothes and not expensive, equipment that is going to enable us to teach. And maybe this also has to do with the parents, Prof, because some of the parents, would tell you. I remember, and I don't normally like saying this, but in my street where we come from, we had these guys with our parents. You find that I'm raised by a single mother. One of they still have both parents. And I remember one other friend of mine, when I said we were going to varsity, he said, "Hey, when I'm on you don't even think about clothes, that people there, they've got clothes that 2 weeks, I remember very, very well, I just said, this one doesn't understand. Because of, I think in my class, they always called me that when you are a lawyer, either they will say radio person or lawyer. So it was a well-known thing that I'm the speaker, our high school. Now, after my first and second year, when I was now in SRC on my second year, I met up this fellow and I told him, and it's the very same thing that I told him, that you'll be shocked. People don't even notice what you're wearing because there's just so many people that have got. So if you think that having a Kavela is the most expensive thing, there's someone who's got, 10 of them. So you will never finish it, right? So we are, as young people, concerned about things that don't matter. And maybe that's the greater challenge to say, going back to, what you were asking, how does a young person listening now make use of this moment to make sure that they succeed? You, as rightfully as Prof was saying, you need to know who you are, understand your strengths and weaknesses. Don't be quick to undermine yourself because your circumstances are different from your friend next door. And I think that's the biggest mistake that we make. Our journeys may be intertwined, but they can never be the same. For some, you need to have a drunkard mother so that you can be quick when you're studying, quick when you're doing your schoolwork, so that when the drunkard mother comes back, you are done. Get the point? So for some, for some, you realize that if you had a parent that was not a drunkard, then you'd relax and know that I've got all the time in the world. And that is sometimes one of the challenges that some of the young people that we have today, they relax, thinking that they've got time, and time is something that sometimes you don't have. So I'm not saying we must overlook the challenges that we're facing, but I'm saying let's tackle them head on, in the same manner that we're able to haba side first boyfriend. Let it be in the same way that haba you wake up, but this time around, or later you are studying, you are pushing, so that tomorrow you can have a better story that you can share with those that are after you. Because I'm telling you now, Oscar, that the current generation, and maybe it's a good thing, everyone wants a platform, but not everyone has something to offer on the platforms that they're given, and it's because of they've never underwent the proper procedure of how to make it. There's this one wise guy, and when I was a graduate, I think I was graduating at the time, and he said the most successful of people are those that will persistently continue pursuing that vision beyond the excitement that made them to start. So comprehending the conviction of why you started, it's much more deeper than the excitement. Because of, I think during this time, when you look at on WhatsApp, your friends are online, they've got, virtual parties, and then you ignoring that is true commitment and conviction to the promises that you've made to yourself and to those around you. Because whether you like it or not, we call it black tax, but there's someone at home who is expecting something from you, whether it is knowledge-wise, whether it is to help them to register adversity, whether it is, so you must never strip yourself of the responsibility of remembering that you need to succeed so that you can come give back. And I think that's the most important thing that we hardly emphasize, Prof. We think that when there's an expectation that we must help in one way or the other, then we are being burdened. That's incorrect. If this is a burden, then you shouldn't be live with us now. You should be focusing on yourself. No one of us should be live now if giving back is a burden. So as young people, as a young person, think about why you need to start, and it must have people around it. You must be like a river, not a dam. When this knowledge comes into you, you must be ready to do whatever it takes, and not take shortcuts. Do whatever it takes, follow the right rules, do it as hard as it may be, and have people in mind, because of after that we're going to expect you to give back. That one, you must not run away from it. We're going to expect you to give back. We're going to expect you to to be in the same way you're expecting government to give your mother a house, rightfully so. We're going to expect the same from you. And I think the one thing that I want to, as I leave Oscar, as I allow Oscar to take in, Prof, is I think the other challenge about education and the role of education is that young people think that you need to be educated so that you can get a job. For some, you're going to be employed in a totally different environment, but you need the knowledge from the educational setup.
Broadly.
So you can become a better individual. Some of us have not mastered how to become better individuals, and you need to actually read for that. You need to gain knowledge and to become a better individual. Some of you don't know how to live with people. You need to learn how to live with people, and that's an important part as well, Prof.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Oscarito?
We've lost him.
Yeah, it seems we've lost Oscar there. But I think in terms of how we were continuing with the discussion, the other critical part, Prof, was now the role of families, and I think it brings us with how to develop a structure or a plan to study. And I think in the previous sessions that we once had, I spoke about how the dissemination of responsibilities. How do we empower family members? I like the fact that you brought in your story of your mom on how she indirectly became an inspiration to you. And I think the one thing that I like about this philosophy that in the African communities, we do not take the elders to an old age home. We bring them in the house. They become knowledge. And I was saying we need to identify key role players. There should be timekeepers, and there should be those that are going to now design an exam how it doesn't need your mother to become a professor. It needs just a sense of willingness, but also it wants you. It demands you to obey them and not remind them that actually you are the one that is educated in this house. So it says now the responsibility is you need to now give them that position to say Rahadi, we're not about timekeeper, that during this time and this time my phone is confiscated. If I'm battling with the phone, my phone is confiscated, and that's what I'm going to. And then when now you'll establish the questionnaire, mama, and then I'll write at this time, and that's how it will go. And I think that was my view, Prof. But let me just allow you in terms of this. How do you plan that structure, and also making sure that we tie in family members?
Yeah, look, it's pretty much not dependent on students here. But students are immersed in varying degrees of socialization and backgrounds to that. You can imagine somebody saying to you, I'm a doctor today, but I come from a broken family. That person did not choose to be part of a broken family. That person was born in a family which perhaps eventually became broken because of certain circumstances. But it was through those circumstances that this learner managed to realize the potential of escaping, right? Positively, escaping that space of demise, that space of quagmire, which could not offer him or her a chance to progress in a conducive environment. Vis-a-vis, you also have a woman today who is a street vendor, who was left by a husband many moons ago, who decided to go and sell in an informal market a few goods, yet is able to produce a doctor. So the point of dedication on both fronts is important. The point of communication is important. The point of commitment, of sharing a vision and a dream, and making sure that whatever little support is created in that scenario, it's offered on both sides, right? We're human beings. We have feelings, we have emotions, we have needs. Sometimes it's a need to be appreciated. Sometimes it's a need for a decent meal on the table for one to function optimally. The entire social infrastructure must be there to allow people to progress. But sometimes it becomes difficult. If you interview some of the prominent figures in this country and elsewhere, I'm tempted to refer to the Dr. Ben Carson's story, right? Who managed to assist Dr. Mokete in separating the first Siemens twins case in South Africa. And later, of course, had ambitions to become a president and contested against the likes of Donald Trump and others. A prominent figure in the American space. Here is a Black person who is highly respected as a neurologist, who was raised by a single mother, a difficult time during his upbringing, but the mother realized TV was a problem. I'm going to allow him and the brother 2 shows per week. I want to see them reading most of the time. After being inspired, working for a professor who had a huge home library, and she asked the professor, "Did you read all the books?" And the professor said, "No, not all the books, but I like having them here." It's this amount of inspiration that allows people to grow mentally and have the necessary mental skills to understand, analyze, provide solutions to their everyday life experience.
Wow. No, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is amazing. I just want to give you a minute each. Just let's throw in closing remarks, and then I'm going to do my closing remarks because as you were speaking, I was writing some stuff. So I'm just going to summarize all the points that you shared with us today, with all our viewers, and then it will be goodbye. We've went past an hour. We're supposed to take an hour, but I'm going to start with Radebe. Just give us your closing remarks, and then Prof, you give us your closing remarks, and then I'll do mine, and we're out of here. Fortunately, we didn't get any questions, and not that people didn't understand, but I feel people have received what they needed today. That's why we didn't get questions online, but we've got so many people with us.
I think first of all is to appreciate the opportunity to from time to time engage with people, and I think time is a very essential component, not just in society but in life, because the time that we spend with everyone that was joining us is something that we'll never ever receive, at least not in this lifetime. Now, what has been empirical and over the week and even yesterday, TUT was trending on Twitter on TUT must fall, and I think having checked those tweets, I also just got a lot of impressions from people, and the one thing that I can say is, as human beings or as an individual, be mindful of what you do today, and always ask yourself one question on whether the man and woman that I want to be tomorrow, will they be proud of the action that I'm taking now, whether good or bad, and whether consciously or unconsciously, whether this is willingly or unwillingly. If you were to look back 5 years, 10 years down the line, would you be proud of that very moment? And subsequently, will this aid you to become the person that you want? or would you be forced to make excuses to those that would be around you at that time to say I was not sober or I didn't know better? And I think my advice from time to time is think twice. The great thing about life is that nothing is permanent, and the bad thing about life is that nothing is permanent. So where you are today, you won't end there, whether it's in a good place or in a bad place. And similarly, where you are today, if it's a good place, it doesn't mean that you end up there as well. Be careful how you treat people. That's why I ended.
Awesome. Prof,
yeah, a short parting shot. Life in the 21st century can be demanding in all facets, socially, educationally, religiously, economically, and so forth. It's up to us as a nation, it's up to us as a people to make a difference out there. And that difference has a starting point. And the starting point is the individual himself or herself. I'm one believer who says, if a question is posed, whether it's on geometry or it's on financial systems or it's on geography or any of the sciences, regardless of your background, give an answer. Because failure to give an answer reflects by and large the amount of ignorance that one person might suffer from. Knowledge is a quest that must be managed, must be achieved in order to understand ourselves and the world around us. Be angry when a question is asked and you don't have answers for such questions. We have 9 provinces in this country. We have 6 colors in our national flag. Get to know who you are. Get to know where you at. Understand where you are going. You might not reach there, as Radebe has suggested, but do not betray your dreams. I'll leave it at that.
Wow. No, thank you so much. Let me just run through this in a minute to everybody who's with us. And thank you for sticking around past an hour. The first thing to all the students and those that are writing exams during this time, and I think it applies to everybody. Number one thing was manage your phone. Make sure you manage your phone. Make sure how you use this thing. I'm going to demonstrate like this thing. Make sure that you use it rightly. Secondly, be ready to take the bull by its horns. Passion must be translated into action. Know yourself.
Yeah.
Are you an independent learner who just go textbooks and you can just go through them? Or you are that person who needs help? You need mentorship as you are studying. You can't study on your own. Also, the issue of self-management is very key. Know your power time. Are you a morning person, a night person, afternoon person, and do your best during that time. One of the most powerful statements was, don't betray your dreams. Make sure you don't betray your dreams. It's your dream, don't betray it. Another key thing, family support. Let's support each other. If there is somebody who is studying, that's part of your family, support them in this time. They need your support. And Professor has highlighted different methods of support that can be given. Commitment from the learner, commitment to the one that is supporting as well is very key. Social challenges are not worth it to stop you. They are not rather you must take them as sources of inspiration for you to do what you have to do. Think twice when you make decisions. Let's make a difference. Let's help each other. Be angry when you don't have answers. And the last statement is that when opportunity meets a prepared person, and I always remember one of my mentors, TJ, and he's live with us, he would make an illustration and he says, when opportunity meets a prepared person, you know. So I'm thinking about that when Tete Radebe mentioned it as well. We are being prepared. When you are studying, you are being prepared for opportunities that are coming your way. And like we said in one of the episodes that we did, that Be a master in a trade. Be a master in a certain skill. Don't just be a diploma holder. Become a master. Become a star in a certain field. Focus on it and do your best. I just want to take this time to thank Radebe and Professor Hanyane for your time to be with us, and to everybody who joined us live on Facebook and here on Zoom. I'm just going to highlight, we've got Ashley Baloyi, we've got David Mukwebo, we've got TJ. Thank you so much, guys, for being with us, and have a blessed weekend. All the best to those that are writing exams. It's time, and we wish you all the best. You're going to make it if you can apply some of the things that we shared and some of the things that you already know. Application is, you're going to get the result. Thank you, gents. May the Lord bless you.
Thank you so much.
Ita.